I'm Andy Linehan, a member of the City Club Board of Governors. Welcome to City Club and another important presentation, this time featuring Dr. Karl-Henrik Robert, founder of the Natural Step to Sustainability. As you know, our guest speaker was originally scheduled to speak today at lunch, but he's been very gracious to allow us to change it to a morning presentation because Governor Kitzhaber, of course, had to reschedule his speech for today at lunch. Before I introduce our speaker today, I want to introduce Kate Wells, the coordinator of the Natural Step. Kate's sitting in the back there. If any of you are interested in learning more about the Natural Step or getting involved here locally in Oregon, please talk to Kate Wells. Our member host seated here today at the front podium is Ron Ennis. He's co-chair of the Business and Technology Issue Committee. He'll ask the first question of our speaker today. And if any of you are interested in getting involved in Natural Step activities through City Club, the Business and Technology Committee this year is focusing on the Natural Step and how it can help businesses succeed. Following Ron Ennis's question, we'll open the floor to questions from other City Club members in the audience. Please approach the microphone, which is here in the center, even as Ron is finishing up his last question, so we'll have enough time for everybody to ask questions. And please limit your question to about 30 seconds. We're really very, very lucky to have Dr. Robert here with us this week. As you're aware, he is the founder of the international movement known as the Natural Step. Perhaps one of the reasons that the Natural Step has become so popular around the world and has gained such credibility is that its creator had already achieved a certain amount of renown internationally as a medical scientist. Dr. Robert is one of Sweden's foremost cancer scientists whose career has involved research on leukemia, lymphoma, lung cancer, and their potential causes. And thinking about those causes, I think, was part of the story of the origin of the Natural Step. In 1989, Dr. Robert initiated the environmental movement known as the Natural Step, and with Dr. John Holmberg, developed the system conditions for ecological sustainability that are the core of the Natural Step. After a distinguished career at Sweden's Karolinska Institute, in 1995, Dr. Robert was appointed professor of resource theory at the University of Gothenburg, Sweden. Dr. Robert is here in Portland as part of a 5-day international conference on the Natural Step that many of you may be participating in as well. Welcome, Dr. Robert.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. It's such an honor to be here, and I want to thank the City Club and the local Natural Step organization for making this possible. I'm extremely grateful, and I'm stunned. I have met with 600 wild Americans the first day of this conference, and now 400 for subsequent days. And it has been as rewarding as exhausting, I can assure you. Anyhow, I'm excited, and I like this so much, to the work I do, that I would like to share with you how it started and why we did it and so forth. The Natural Step is today an organization, it's an NGO constituted in 8 countries, and we have an international umbrella organization where each country has its vote, and we own it together. Also, Sweden has, in a few days, to sign a license with the international organization. Up to this point, all the other countries have signed license with us to operate, but now even Sweden has to do it. And the reason is that we would hate the idea of this being perceived as the Vikings trying to take over or something like that. The whole idea is namely based on dialogue to recruit intelligent people with integrity who would like to take part in a dialogue rather than a fight and defense mode of activities in this area, which is the most commonly applied one. And it has been very natural why it was like that, because so few people paid attention to the environment previously. It was a few who noticed that something was wrong. And once they were absolutely certain that something was very badly wrong and the others didn't pay attention, controversy is very natural. It must be like that at the time of Silent Spring and so forth, as you all know. But then after a while, more and more intelligent people understand that maybe I don't need this mobile if...
That's where the...
I see, I'm sorry, okay. After a while, we don't need the fight and attack mode, or at least we do not need that as the only concept, because there are so many people who would like to do something. And if we just batter them all the time socially, you're bad because you're not already sustainable, it's like almost keeping them away from actually doing something. So meanwhile, the message was out there to a sufficient enough number of people, there must be some organization taking care of the good guys and trying to help them. And that was the task that we set out to do. Why not move out to industries and municipalities where they are starting to pay attention and feed them much more robust tools to really do this in a systematic way. And today it has ended up with a shared framework which is elaborated together between scientists and smart decision makers in municipalities and business as a robust framework that can handle sustainability issues. It is based on first-order principles for sustainability. So we have defined sustainability on a principle level that is scientifically robust. And we have also defined sustainable development, which is a step-by-step approach to meet those principles. That's where we are today. How did this enterprise start? Because I didn't sit on a chair. I didn't find any principles for sustainability and then started a journey in the world trying to convince people that I was right. That would not have been a very efficient method. So I rather turn to my scientific peers in other fields in Sweden, like in physics, chemistry, economy, and I asked them for advice. I'm just a cell scientist. I know a lot about normal cells and how they turn into cancer cells and what that is. That's the only thing I know from a scientific point of view. Could you please help me to try to identify first-order principles for sustainability? Because there is chaos out there. Every environmental meeting starts with somebody saying, well, everyone speaks about sustainability, but nobody knows what it is, which is extremely unsatisfactory. It must be defined. And I saw in front of me, like, you know, it's a big game that society tries to play with each other, like chess. But we didn't agree on the rules first. We just started to play with on the detail level, but you know, when you buy a game, you get on the box already a description of the objective of the game and how you play it, the rules. But that was not on the scene at the time. So it was about fight and defense. People said, let's build a beltway around the city because that will release emissions in the city nucleus. And then somebody says, no, if you build a beltway around the city, you help the car owners. That will trigger off more cars, and that will be bad for the environment. And then somebody else says, that's always how backward people talk. We have a technical development in the same time. I mean, we have catalytic converters, don't we? Yeah, but they emit nitrogen oxides, which are even worse to the ozone layer than freons and CFCs. And in this way, the debate was just going on and on and on details, but nobody sat down and asked themselves, where are the principles we are aiming for, and how can we regard all those details we are talking about as steps on that way? And this is curious, because that's what you all do in this room, because you were born systems thinkers. Each brain is a master in doing the right thing here. But people together are generally stupider than the most stupid participant of the whole group. So in spite of that, each individual is so extremely intelligent, we're generally dumb together when it comes to systems thinking. In spite of that, a group of people know so much more together than either individual. Systems generally are torquated and battered when people together operate in systems. And why is that? Because what comes so natural to the individual brain is to go for the first order principles first. What is this about? This looks complex. What can I be certain about? And then you start to arrange the structures in your brain until you can handle a complex system. People together don't do that. They divide themselves into different fields of expertise, but they don't sit down like the individual brain and go for the first order principles together till they are deadly certain and have a consensus that this is what it's all about, and then start to act. However, that is also the challenge, because if they do, groups of people are much, much smarter than any individual. So the whole game would be about to find those principles. So I was desperate about trying to get them, and I definitely didn't know about them. So what I did, I turned to the scientists and asked them for help. Please help me to do what the individual brain does so that we can do that in the community as well. And the fight started, and I learned myself during that time a technique to find the upstream causes to problems, the principles from arguments like that, by asking people, well, isn't that about the detail? Please help me now, we must move upstream again and look for the principles. And after a while, it took a few years, they started to evolve, and then I wrote my first book about the system conditions. Then I met with John Holmberg at Chalmers Institute, and we started to elaborate them together. Eventually got a doctoral thesis on it, and now we have many scientific reports, doctoral dissertations, and so forth, describing the intellectual concept. But that's not the main objective of this. The main objective is community building, to share it and to make it into an effective dialogue. And it all started with me after having aroused the interest of my scientific peers in Sweden 10 years back in time. I needed desperately a very powerful strategy to launch what we agreed on, and I thought it was very compelling. So the plan arose in my mind that why not send this out to every Swedish household? Every Swedish household, a little booklet that scientists at last agreed on something, because mass media every day showed how they were disagreeing about everything. And I thought it was so stunning that scientists at last could agree on something which was very radical indeed, and definitely described how far away we were from sustainability. So what I did was that I turned to some very beloved entertainers. This may seem very strange to you, but I actually did. I phoned up the most beloved one, Lill Lindfors in Sweden, and asked her, me and all those scientists are going to launch a continuous education program in Sweden. Would you like to help me and support it by, kicking it off in TV if we succeed to do this, and mail it to all Swedish households? What do you mean, how can you afford that? And so, no, that's not the issue here. My question is only, if we succeed, would you like to, celebrate this on Swedish TV together with your peers? I said, of course, it sounds amazing. Who would you like to have with you on TV that day? And she gave me some names of her friends, and I phoned them up and said, me and Lill would like to launch a continuous, education program. And if we succeed and so forth, and after a while I had quite a number of very, beloved and impressive artists on the agenda together with the scientists. Meanwhile, I was iterating all those versions of the consensus document that we intended to send out. The first one I thought was brilliant because there was no one criticizing it. I was sitting by my computer doing it. And I said, send it out to all those physicists and chemists. I said, this is the truth. Would you like to, be partners in this? And it came back. And when a professor gets from another professor something which is claimed to be the truth, he can't help himself from finding all the errors. So it came back and it had gained weight from all the corrections. And I sent out another version, and this was going on 21 times until we had a consensus, which was much more radical because we were going upstream and look for principles all the time. So it didn't become diluted, it became more and more strict, more and more demanding and radical. If you do it the right way, it always does. And then I turned to Swedish TV and said, me and all those artists and all those scientists are going to launch a continuous education program. Could we celebrate this if we succeed? And he just laughed, the head of TV Channel 1 in Sweden, said, since you won't succeed, I can give you a day. And he gave me a day, which is the day in Sweden where we celebrate spring. And that's the last of April. And he said, I give you 2 months. If you have everything there then, and the budget and everything, we do it. And then I went to the government Department for Education and said, me and all those artists and scientists and Swedish TV are going to launch an education program. Would you like to have this little package of information? It's a booklet and an audio cassette, free of charge to all Swedish schools. I said, oh, of course, what do you mean? It won't cost anything? No, just send it to the schools. Would that be interesting? I said, of course, and when could we get that? Well, what do you say? And they said, we would like it 1 week before the TV celebration so that the kids already know about this when the parents are hit by it. So then I went to the Swedish king and said, me and the government and so forth, you know the rest. And said, would your majesty like to patronize this if we succeed? And he said, of course, after asking some questions. And then I went to the sponsors, me and the king and government. And in this way, we built up momentum by going for people that really can improve it and that you really trust. And after a while, you gather momentum. And then that made it possible to gather the finance needed to send it out to all Swedish households and all schools. So that was the starting point of a dialogue which goes on and on and on. I'll just briefly, before I leave questions to you, go through the framework which is today applied by all sectors in Sweden. Almost all municipalities, including Stockholm, apply this. And a growing number of various fields in the industry, from the construction sector to retail companies and insurance industry and so forth. A growing number are using the same framework. And the reason is that it's based on first-order principles for sustainability. So you can use it as a dialogue, no matter the scale, no matter the field of expertise, you can talk to one another. And suddenly engineers understand economists if they have the same framework in their heads, and now you can start to cooperate and build community, which acts much more efficiently than either individual. The framework is based on first-order principles, and it took us 2 years to discover those first-order principles, because everyone has tried by starting from how complex nature operates. And it's so stunningly, amazingly complex that it is a very difficult task to do. And no matter where you start, you end up in networks of extreme complexity. So suddenly we realized there must be something wrong with this. This will never be favorable. And we asked ourselves, is there no way we can turn ourselves upside down and look from a completely different perspective on this? And then we discovered the possibility of not asking for sustainability principles, but asking for non-sustainability principles, and then put not in front of those. Which means, in what different ways can we destroy the environment? Is that maybe more possible? And that's absolutely much more logical if you think about it, because it's non-sustainable, because we are destroying it. And sustainability was not an issue until we started to destroy it. So why not go for the functionally different mechanisms by which we can destroy nature, and then put a not in front of those? So we did. And then we discovered an extreme simplicity. There are only 3 ways of destroying it. One way is to systematically introduce matter from the Earth's crust through mining and drilling for petroleum and so forth at a rate which exceeds the sedimentation rate back of all those compounds down into the solid rock again. That's a net input of pollution from a compartment outside the biosphere where we live. And the reason is based on the conservation laws. Matter cannot disappear. If you would be consultants from outer space and mankind would ask you, please help us to destroy the world, what would you tell them? Of course, you would tell them, go down in mineral ores, wherever you can find them, and go for minerals that shouldn't be in nature. Go for minerals that are extremely scarce in nature and use them in a wasteful way. Because then they will be scattered all over the place, and concentrations of cadmium, lead, mercury, carbon, sulfurous acid rain, phosphates in lake will increase as long as you do it. And suddenly you will reach thresholds where you will hit one species after another. So please do that. And you would find it in no time at all, because you were born systems thinkers. If you were standing on the moon, who in this room would not be scared if you saw 6 billion people, soon becoming 10, digging more and more stuff out of mineral ores that shouldn't be here? And why are we surprised that cadmium is slowly increasing in our bodies? And who believes that this will end as long as we introduce more and more cadmium in this? It's like pouring more and more ink out into a bathtub. It turns more and more light blue. And how could we stop it? By having the ink in filters that we then put down in the bathtub. From the moon we would all see how filters leak, how it rains on big filter deposits like big coffee brewers. After a while it's all over the place anyhow, because everything disperses but nothing disappears. The second possibility to destroy Earth would be to produce chemicals ourselves at a higher rate than they can be biodegraded or integrated into nature systems in the cycles. And if you would be consultants from outer space trying to help people to destroy the world fast, you would go for persistent, unnatural compounds that nature has never seen, and you would advise people to use them in a wasteful manner. And then after a while, the whole bathtub would turn light blue and then dark blue with such compounds. And that's the reason why polar bears today are feeding their cubs with anti-flammables, why we have increasing concentrations of PCB, DDT, dieldrins, phenols, phthalates, chlorparaffines, bromine organic compounds, dioxins. We have 72,000 different chemicals around, and we don't have a clue where they end up, but we know that concentrations are increasing. And there is a limit in all biological systems. And then we only have one other possibility to destroy it, physically, with our hands, manually. We can put asphalt on nature. We can use 2 large fish boats too long until we have knocked out a fish population. We can squander a rainforest. We can dig groundwater flows so that the bloodstream of nature doesn't work anymore. So with tools, we can systematically encroach on the life-supporting systems of nature. But if we don't pollute it through a net input from mines, neither with compounds we make ourselves, neither push nature away, there is no way that we would have a non-sustainable society. But today we have. And we are wasting everything. It's amazing how we are wasting. And since we waste, we have to go back to the mine again. We have to have such a profound turnover of chemicals that they are all over the place. And we can't live from the interest what forest gives us. We have to live from the capital. So wasting is like gas pedal on all the others, and it all is like us running into a funnel of declining resources, where life-supporting systems are declining while we become more and more people on Earth. And if you're an individual company located in this funnel of declining resources, what should that company do? How will that affect future market? And this is the exciting thing of this. If you are an individual company, and you would like to head towards the opening of that funnel rather than into the world, what would you do? Well, if you think upstream in cause-effect chains, it's so easy. You should, step by step, decrease your economic dependence on mining for scarce elements. Persistent unnatural compounds. Any activity that is encroaching on green services. And you should decrease your dependence on wasting in relation to more sophisticated methods, step by step. Because then you're not part of the problem, you are part of the solution. How will the worlds appear to companies who remain heavily dependent on squandering of resources in this way? How will the world appear financially? Well, I can ask you, as systems thinkers, what do you think will happen, say with some 10 billion people on Earth who are going to bid on the remainders of resources in this funnel? What will happen on the prices of resources, of clean water? What will happen with the prices on pure food in this funnel? What will happen with insurance costs? When you want to insure something, which is producing something, which is hazardous to the system, will it be more and more expensive or more and more cheap to insure something like that if you have to pay for the disaster? What will happen to market reactions? What happened to Shell when it was evident what they did in Nigeria? Or what happened to the market credibility? And that changed them. Today, they are investing in photovoltaics. They are thinking about social concerns. We see it all over the place, how activities change on business. In this funnel, it's fostering them towards the opening of the funnel. What will happen on green taxes? Well, a decade ago, it wasn't possible to talk about it even in the United States. Today, everyone speaks about green taxes and how we shall implement them and so forth. So, these things will happen whether we like it or not. There will be profound changes on the market in this funnel. And there are 2 alternatives. Either we become proactive, take a lead, and with straight backs and in ordered form, we go through to the opening of the funnel. or will we be pulled and dragged that way, crawling on our knees, but there is no way out of going to the opening of the funnel, and the self-benefit is there. So suddenly companies realize the possibility to avoid costs from social battering by taking care of the fourth principle, to waste less in relation to meeting human needs. The whole social quality is there. We must be more efficient meeting human needs per resource throughput. They systematically avoid costs by using other metals but mercury and lead, and find new batteries that work on other metals than those that are scarce in nature and shouldn't be there. They learn how to wash their shirts with other detergents than persistent unnatural compounds. They start to buy woods from forestry men who take care of the forest rather than squandering it, because they want to have a long-term relationship with their supplier, not a short-term when he's out of business if he is squandering his forest. And all this is today happening. And if you have a very robust mental model to make this clear and understandable, it's much faster that you can implement those programs in companies. So companies like Electrolux and IKEA and Scandic Hotels and so forth in Sweden started it, and they earned money step by step by avoiding mistakes that the competitors on the market were hit by all the time. And in the beginning they called it bad luck. How we couldn't foresee that problem, But after a while they started to ask themselves, why could IKEA foresee that problem, and how did Scandic do it? And then after a while the cat was out of the bag, and they started to learn from each other and put demands on suppliers. And then it spread internationally. People read about it. Today DuPont, BP, Nike and so forth are taking on the concept. And so does municipalities. And to municipalities it's so rewarding. To you, people working in municipalities, it is not very surprising that people take care of social standards, avoid garbage dumps, take care of their forests. As politicians, it's quite close at hand. But when business are doing it out of self-interest, suddenly the whole community can start to operate together. In Sweden, we have a growing number of municipalities that act as umbrella organizations for business, farmers, everyone, and they use this system's perspective when they talk to one another and solve problems. And that's, finally, something which we are longing for, because today, we have one major problem, I think, on Earth, and that is to try to heal all the destroyed and battered cultures all around the world. People don't believe in anything anymore. People don't believe in science. In a growing number of countries in the world, they don't believe in religions anymore. They don't believe in their bosses at job. They don't believe in politicians. They don't believe in anything. They are skeptical. And meanwhile, crime goes up, kids even murder one another, so forth. So we are all scared what's going on in this funnel. And I think that's the major task, because if that is going on, it will be difficult to think about future generations if the present generation is about surviving and having your kids alive while they go to school and back. And I think that the good news is that if people see that this is a decent thing to do, and we have a language that we can understand, and we can structure the thoughts, it becomes so much more compelling to do it together. And then people feel that we have a vision together, and now the social problems have a tendency to take care of itself. But there is nothing there that joins us and merges us, and this must now appear on the global scene. It's a culture, it's a sort of taking care of the planet culture that must spread around the world. If we have a mutual language for that, there is no other way than by which we can handle the social problems we have. No number of jails or anything will help us unless we have something we can believe in. And this is a decent task that we could have as a common denominator in all cultures, and still, of course, allow local differences and everything, which is the beauty of cultures, that they are diverse, but there must be something that merges us. And today this is a major threat, that what we're doing today is not sustainable. But making it sustainable is so much more attractive, so much more sophisticated, much more lovely world to live in. And if we could make that happen as a vision, I think social problems would be much easier to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robert. I prepared 3 or 4 questions, and they were all completely answered in your talk. I was going to ask you about hope for the future and about the biggest challenges, and you've already addressed those. I was thinking when we had John Emmerich from Norm Thompson speak to our committee at the end on the natural step. They've embraced the natural step here in town, as is Nike and Collins Pine. We asked John, what you as the CEO of a major corporation in Portland, what do you see as the impact on Norm Thompson? Instantly, without hesitation, he said that my employees are so excited about coming to work because they're working for 2 bottom lines. They're working for Norm Thompson for things that we believe in collectively, and they're working for something in the larger picture. And I think one of the things Dr. Robert has brought to all of us is that kind of hope. My question for you is, as you now are looking globally and working in multiple nations, working with huge corporations, can you give us some hopeful examples out of major, you mentioned Shell Oil, for example. Can you give us some major hope that you see in some major corporations? And then also, I also have a great deal of skepticism. Is it just window dressing? You know, traditionally the PR has been the group. Can you address both sides of that issue, please?
Yes. If we talk about the window dressing, is that an alternative word to greenwash? Is that
that's another part of
okay.
it. Yes.
Well, first of all, this is not something you can market yourself with, because if you say this company is working with an natural step, and you think that's enough, immediately journalists would ask, what's that? And they read the papers. It's being non-dependent on fossil fuels, mercury, lead, persistent unnatural compounds, and so forth. I mean, you would be in extremely bad shape if you said that. So it's extremely difficult to use the natural step as something you greenwash with. It's the opposite way around. It's a very radical description of how the future state will look once we are sustainable. And then to step by step move for it. And that's why most companies are quite low-key about it. So they don't brag too much about it. They have it as an internal discussion and dialogue to improve and to avoid mistakes and problems that their competitors on the market are hit by. So it's much more low-key than that and sophisticated. So we haven't had any problems with greenwash. You know, it's like expecting a burglar or a criminal to defend himself by saying, but I visited an extremely good law school, you know. I mean, who would care? I mean, it's even worse, you know. So it's, the paradox is that you can use Greenpeace for that if they would go for it. You could stand with your arms around Greenpeace because they work in the other way around. They search for problems and scandals, and if you have your arms around them, that could act as greenwash if you're clever enough to hide your dirty laundry and so forth. But so we haven't had that problem. But and then to the good news, the hope. If I would stand in Africa, I would probably talk about water and fertile land and starvation. In America, I think it might be more appropriate to talk about energy systems, because energy is something we talk about a lot in this part of the world, and so do we in Sweden. How many in this room believes that we have an energy problem with regard to access to energy, to available energy? How many in this room believe that this is a bottleneck for human development, just the overall availability of energy?
Well, I think especially the kind of energy that we have available, that's a problem.
Yeah, so that's it. Any other questions? No, that's exactly how it is. You see, the availability of energy is not the problem. It is the carrier of energy that is the problem. It is petroleum and nuclear power, the non-sustainable ones. And when we say non-sustainable, it misguides the mind away from the system conditions. It tells us that it is the availability that is the problem, the access to petroleum and fossil fuels that is the problem. And each time we have found new fossil fuel ores, you know, we say, you see, it wasn't a problem at all. Today, people say, if those fossil fuel wars could end, because it is not that is the problem, it is the system conditions that is the problem. It is the systematic increase and build-up of greenhouse gases, sulfurous acid rain, polluting metals from the fossil fuels. That is the problem. That's what creates the funnel of declining resources, that we pollute the system because matter doesn't disappear. So the idea of renewable energy is that it can be part of the cycles of nature and won't pollute this place materialistically. So you're absolutely right. If you would like to know anything about the future perspective, how much energy do we have? Well, the sustainable energy we have is from the sun, of course, and it provides us with 10,000 times more energy than the whole human civilization is spending. So if you add all energy sources, all carriers together in one big bag, like fossil fuels, nuclear power, wind power, water power, the works, it only corresponds to less than 1/10,000th of the incoming sun energy. So we've never had an energy problem, you're absolutely right. We have an energy carrier problem, which is a materialistic problem. This means that if you would use traditional, mediocre photovoltaic cells, it would be sufficient with 10% of the desert of Sahara to give exactly the same energy output as the whole world is using. 10% of Sahara. Of course, we wouldn't be stupid enough to put it in Sahara like that. The nice thing with the sun is that it distributes itself. That's why Clinton has his 1 million roof problem within a few years. And that's why Shell started, and Amoco and Evron. They know how the future will look like in this funnel. It will be about those technologies. So they are today investing billions in photovoltaics, and they are investing in cheap deserts where they are going to put them. And they are starting to talk in favor of green taxes. Why? Because it would make it so much easier to convince the stakeholders and the board that this is the way we should go instead. So the cat is out of the bag, and this gives me hope. When big, strong petroleum companies are starting to talk in favor of increasing the tax on what they are selling, while they at the same time start to buy cheap deserts and invest in photovoltaics without any politicians threatening them with jail or anything like that, that gives me hope.
Questions from the audience?
Hey. My name is Diane Mitchell. I'm a member of the City Club. I lived in Sweden for 22 years.
That's why the pronunciation was perfect.
Yes, right. My husband was a bass player named Red Mitchell, and he wrote a song called The Sun and the Water. Do you know that?
Wonderful. What was the name of the song?
The Sun and the Water?
The Sun and the Water.
He would have probably been on that television show with you.
Lovely.
Sure. Anyway, he wrote that in the 1970s, at the time that Sweden was talking about nuclear power.
Yeah.
And the people in Sweden voted to not have power, to only allow the power plants to continue for 25 years.
Yeah.
And now I was curious to know, since I now live in the United States again, how has that progressed, and has the natural step influenced the government's decision to close those nuclear plants?
It's an extremely complex question, but what has happened to make it, the first very quick answer is that they have now decided in the government to shut one of the 12 plants down to demonstrate that now we really mean it. It has been an ongoing debate back and forwards, and a lot of people have said, why do we shut them down? They are relatively safer than the nuclear plants around the world, and it's such a destruction of capital to destroy them once we have built them. Why not allow them to go for a few more years and so forth? And but the most, I think, depressive part of the dialogue has been the pest and cholera debate we've had, because people have defended nuclear power by trying to convince people that fossil fuels is worse, or are worse, and vice versa. And this debate is not very constructive. Again, we are back to start to plan from the future, backcasting. Where are we when it is sustainable? And then look backwards in time and say, what should we do today to get there? And I was invited to a nuclear power plant. It's called Ringhals in Sweden, and even I was nervous then. How could I bring this enterprise into the principles I was talking about? But when we do these presentations, we never ever train on homeland from the people we talk to. So we trained on farming, and we trained on refrigerators, production, and stuff like that. So they were completely calm in their tummies when they learned about the principles for sustainability and so forth. And then when the model was on screen and everyone understood it, we had 150 people on the leading team, or one of the leading teams in the world for running nuclear power plants in front of us, physicists and so forth. And they were sitting there as peers, and they had the same mental model in their head, and everybody understood what it meant. And the inevitable question came after having trained on refrigerators and farming. What about nuclear power? What do you say, Dr. Robert? And I said I would be an idiot if I would put myself in front of the world's leading team on these things and try to explain to them what the obstacles are in this framework with regard to nuclear power. I have the leading specialists here, so you help me to work it out. And there is a model for how to do this. Number A, share the model. Now we have a shared model. Number 2, list all the problems you have today with regard to this framework. Number 3, envision a future where you don't have those problems, and then connect the two. So we started, point B now, where are the problems? And we started with system condition number 1, and I asked them, is there anything at all in your activities that allow matter from the Earth's crust anywhere causing a problem slowly increasing anywhere in the ecosystems? And there was an embarrassing silence. And the uranium comes from there and so forth. But it's very little, one of them said, because it's so extremely energy intense. Well, another one said skeptically, it's quite a lot. If we would use Swedish ores, it would be 1 ton of the mineral per gram of uranium, and then it rains on it like a big coffee brewer, and it's a lot out there just from the mining. I agree, another one of them said that we have a lot of fossil fuels as well involved in the process. Nobody thinks about that, and it's even worse than that, because since it's not so rich, the minerals we have here, we buy the uranium from Canada, where it's much richer and where it's not 1 to the 1,000. So it's really bad in that context. And they added more and more on the list with regard to violation of system condition number 1 today. And then one of them said, but we can dig it down and safeguard it in the Earth's crust. Wait. That's on point C. Now we're just going to list the problems we have today. So we have accumulation of matter from the Earth's crust today due to this activity. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we move to system condition number 2. Is there anything at all that evolves inside the power plant that in any way causes a problem and that might leak out anywhere and so forth? Again, this thing happened, and I don't have to go all through this, but we got an enormous list of problems that actually exist. And again, when we came to the 3rd principle, are there any areas at all squandered due to this? Green services? No, well, that you can delete, one of the managers said. Just skip it, because we have one little power plant and then we send the power in wires in the air, so we don't move any areas away at all. Well, another of the managers said, I don't agree. I mean, in the mining process, so large areas are squandered that we call it national sacrifice areas in Canada. I don't agree. What happened in this room? Isn't it fascinating? What happened was the following. When you do this, and when you're neutral, and you just take notes, and they have the same intellectual concept on the wall, they end up in a frustration. On the one hand, they want to be loyal with their firm and company. On the other, they don't want to appear stupid. And the second of those two things always win. Always. I've never seen an exception to the rule. They have the same framework, and they don't want to just sit there and wait for someone else to come up with the right answer. The right answer comes, and the list suddenly becomes complete. And then the 4th principle, and then I will end this. The world is very efficient, one of them said. And then he watched, he saw how some of them were breathing in to start to say something against that too. And they were, in relation to fossil fuels. And then there was some silence, and then another one said, well, this is a global funnel we are talking about, and we need energy systems that can be applied anywhere. And we would then go from around 400 reactors around the world today, or power plants today, to around 15,000 if we would distribute it on the same intensity as we have in Sweden, 15,000. Would you like that all around the world with all the terrorist groups? And we still haven't solved all the problems that we have now just listed because we don't know how to deal with those problems on the scale even today. It's debated on the scale we have today. So is it really trustworthy that we continue to run something here that we would hate South Africa and everyone else to build up around us? How can we defend that? In front of my eyes, they sorted nuclear power out. They phased it out in front of my eyes in a dialogue. I didn't take part in it in any other way, but just listening what they all said. And they had the framework and the dialogue was running. So again, that gives me hope. People are generally intellectually extremely honest. And as long as the rules are clear, people are honest. And the dishonest ones we don't work with. We work with the honest ones that like this, and they set the example and the standard. And the compelling thing is that the good examples have a tendency to be followed by others.
Dr. Robert, with logic, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Susan Stone, member of the...
You're number 2, sir.
Okay.
You can get up. Well, I'm a Volvo driver, so I have this question about personal transportation vehicles. Do you see hope? Because that's a major user of energy and probably the wrong kind of energy if we want to be sustainable. So where do you see the transportation industry going? And second, do you drive a car, and what kind?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Well, I will... Please help me to remember the private question, and I will address the first question first. I have a tendency to be so involved with my own answer that I forget. So please help me there. Well, the car industry and our use of cars is a tremendous problem. It's one of the worst institutions on this earth when it's about violating those principles. You know, you can watch from a bird's view how enormous trucks are transporting something up to Canada from Florida, and enormous trucks go back and they are stuffed with exactly the same things, say beer, which is actually a taste of something which should hit the mouths of Florida, respectively, and Canada. And they want to enrich their culture by getting beers from both places. And there are 2 ways of doing this. Either you can dissolve that taste in water and send it by trucks every day in bottled beer. And if you do that, which is an extreme way of wasting resources, a sort of nonsense trade, then enormous amounts of fossil fuels are used, system condition number 1, and metals, system condition number 1, and enormous amounts of emissions that are produced in the vehicle, system condition number 2, and enormous green areas are consumed by ever-increasing amounts of asphalt put on green surfaces. So this is a profound way of wasting resources. Why don't they phone one another up once between Florida and Canada and just exchange recipes, you know? It's just incredible how much we violate all those principles with the car and the car industry, of course. Now, in the same time, you can turn it upside down and look at the car industry as a hope, because people love cars and so forth, and they think it's freedom to have a car. Now, the car industry has also looked in this funnel and asked themselves, where is the future technology? And there are future technologies which are mind-blowingly smart and that can be used for everything also other but cars. You can use it not only in private cars, but you can use it on trains, you can use it to fuel energy into communities as power plants and so forth. And the future technology, and now I can only talk about the most brilliant one we know today, is hydrogen technology. It's the smartest thing. You can put photovoltaics up, and with the energy from the photovoltaics, you can smash water into hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen and oxygen together is water. And hydrogen wants to burn with oxygen back into water again. So the emission from an energy process like that is water vapor. So if you have problems with dry air tubes, you can stand there by the exhaust pipe of a car like that, and it's advisable, you know. Anyhow, this is a good concept, right? And there's no waste anywhere in the process because it's solar energy, the water is already there, and you get water back. So it's very nice. Now, how could you store that, and how could you use that? And again, I will show you, we'll talk about the smartest principle now. That is to use something which is called a fuel cell. And it's an open battery, and you introduce the hydrogen from this production into the plus pole, and air to the minus pole. And when you have hydrogen and oxygen that close, hydrogen and oxygen want to combine badly to release that energy again. And to make that happen, electrons must walk in a wire between the plus pole and the minus pole, and you use those electrons in an electricity engine driving the car. That technology already exists. And it's so much more efficient that there are already cars that, well, the quality feeling is like a Mercedes. They accelerate like a sports car, and they are consuming 1.3 deciliter gasoline per 10 kilometers. I mean, it's 1/10 or something of a normal American car. You know? So it's simply a better car. And now the cat is out of that bag. So now the car industry, you know, they are working hard with this, and they are fusing themselves together to be able to afford the production of completely new cars. Meanwhile, they want to earn the money on the old investments they already have. So they are scared to death that politicians will say, oh, you have this technology going, because then politicians can start to put on the thumb screws on fossil fuels and speed it up. They are scared that that will happen too soon. So they act like ducks. They are so calm and nice on the surface, but underneath the water, they're paddling on like, you know, on all the matters and experiments, and those cars are all over the place. And one of you gets so nervous that Toyota suddenly pop up and say, we will do it in 5 years from now, watch us, and you can buy a serial-produced car like that in 5 years from Toyota. And what do you think Chrysler and Mercedes and all the others do? And that's why Volvo fused with Ford to be able to afford it and so forth. Now, if everyone buys a car like that, it will also be much cheaper in mass production. Will there be surfaces for it? Of course not. There must be some kind of road taxing and whatever combined with it. I don't know. We have to solve that politically, because system condition number 3 is still an enormous problem with the areas. But I see it's very hopeful that this technology brings up new ways of giving us energy, and the extraordinarily rich car industry puts the money in for us. So there's the hope side of it, and the bad side is what it does today. So what gives you hope is to have the future scenario here, what we do today there, and then you connect the two, and then it gives you much more hope. Finally, one little example that is also hopeful. I like that you give me so many questions about hope, because it's much more fun to work towards hope than towards depression. To use photovoltaics to produce the energy we need, which is the smartest way of doing it, we know, is much more expensive than using fossil fuels and nuclear power. Why? Well, it's simple. The production volume is so small. It's a matter of scale. So we need to, and it's called the learning curve. For each doubling of production volume, the price goes down around 20%. So we need to double the number of times, and then it will be cheaper to use photovoltaics than nuclear power, and then we can stop running seminars and so forth, right? And this is not a question, because the contents, it's so nice with the photovoltaic. You don't take something up from the ground and burn it. You take it up, put it there, and then it ticks on and gives you money. So the running costs for it are so much lower, it's much more compelling, right? So it's just a matter of scale. And then smart, brilliant American scientists from Princeton calculated on that learning curve how much would it cost in artificial breathing, so to speak, if we invested in it to skip the history of that learning curve and just push the prices down politically with some kind of, violent investment strategy. And the answer they came up with was $10 billion, which I don't find back home. I would pay right away if I did, but it's not there. Is it much? Well, it depends on what you compare with. We're not there yet with regard to photovoltaic investments, but 10 billion, if we compare it with something, and we did a calculation at my university, at my institution, where I'm a professor, we asked ourselves, what about because we have a little green tax in Sweden on fossil fuels. We put some extra tax on it because it's bad. We were one of the first countries that successfully did that in the political system. And it had some effects also. Anyhow, we did. And we asked ourselves, what about if the rest of the world did that? Put exactly that little marginal extra cost on it. How long time would it take on the margin to mobilize $10 billion if we did it globally? And the answer is 5 days. So in the same time as we look like this in small tunnels at one problem at a time, we can raise the vision and look at possibilities, and then you don't see the obstacles. And then the only obstacles are our traditional thinking, what we do today, skepticism, battered cultures, and there you are. And then you can't sleep. You see all those possibilities, and you see that we don't talk about it, but we talk about everything else but solutions. We talk about problems all the time. It's rainforests. Why couldn't we put that little extra tax on the global use of fossil fuels and give it to, say, the rainforests the next week? We're going to only take 5 days to mobilize the money we need for photovoltaic. I mean, just imagine if we could start to talk to one another and address the possibilities rather than all the problems one by one that we have a tendency to drench us or to. We seek knowledge, but we drown in information. And all the information is about everything else but principal solutions. It's about problems. And that's why people have a tendency to be depressed, I think.
I think Susan still wants to know about your car, though.
Thank you. You see what happened? I truly forgot. Me too. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. That's nice. Thank you. I think that, what about my private car? When I started the natural step 10 years ago, I had a car. And I noticed that I started to use it more when I was fighting for the environment, because I was traveling back and forth between my laboratory, my clinic, and the natural step office, and I had to use a car because I needed the speed, I thought. And this was going on for 2 years, and I felt bad about it because I felt you must walk the talk. And I felt I must be, somewhere ahead of the others with regard to what I do in my personal life. And if this takes off and becomes successful, journalists would love to disguise all the dirty laundry I have back home. So, I felt bad, but in the same time I told myself that I have to do it. Because I must run the natural step and I must dig where I am, and I had a lot of excuses for this. And then one day I noticed when I was sitting in something which is called rush hour in Sweden, rush hour, that's when the cars are standing still. We call that rush hour, isn't that funny? And I saw everyone around me, they were sitting in their cars completely still, and then I saw a train from my hospital heading in to the city nucleus of Stockholm by around 120 kilometers per hour. And why haven't I seen that train before, And I started to go on it every now and then saw my colleagues sitting completely still, and I had a professional driver, and I could read my books and study my stuff for the natural step, and I earned time on it. And then I learned some more things. I had a little foldable side bicycle that I brought with me on the train and the buses, so that could take me very quickly between those two. And I started to feel this is freedom, So I got rid of my car. And then I got money from that, and I calculated how much I earned every month for not having a car, and it was stunning. I hadn't dared to make the calculation before. And from that point onwards, I felt only good things about this thing. In the beginning, I felt proud. I was a hero. I took on punishment to demonstrate that I walked the talk. In fact, I only benefited in all aspects. Never ever was I sitting in my car wondering what it was saying, katu-katung, to the right back, and how much that would cost. Never ever did I sit in lines to wait for more gasoline. Never ever did I dash up from meetings because the meter maids were coming downstairs and somebody shouted, "Wow, here they are," and everyone was dashing down. I was just sitting there, So there were no obstacles in it. And I was free, and I got money for it, and I could take a cab. I could, whenever I needed to, I could take a rent car if I really needed one, and so forth. So it was just wonderful. But I also saw some unforeseen obstacles. And the worst thing, and this may sound ridiculous, but I'm still honest with you, the worst thing was when I came on this little foldable bicycle. It's extremely small. It's not bigger than an umbrella when you fold it together to carry it on your bus. Children laugh. And I mean, this may sound, it's stupid. Why does an old man, who is a cancer scientist and so forth, feel ashamed? But I just do. What do you do when you sit on this kid? You can't do anything. You smile a little, but you feel stupid. And that was the worst thing when it was my children's friends who laughed like that. And then they turned to my kids and said, "Is that your father, that ridiculous bicycle?" And they say, "Well, that's our father," And they came back to me. I thought this was problematic. But then I bought diving equipment for me and my kids. And then they said, yeah, he sold his car and bought diving equipment for us. Did he? And that solved the problem. Now, so there are always solutions to everything, but then one thing happened when it was difficult to get beer bottles and heavy stuff home, and then we used car, and because they moved the little store away from us, so I had to have a rent car. And then when we did that, I felt bad about it, so I said to my kids, I'm going to buy a little wheel chart, is that what you call it, a little wheel chart behind the bicycle? A little, that could carry the beer and stuff. And they said, if you do that, Dad, no presents will help. And so there are always obstacles, and I think that the moral answer to this is that it's up to either one personally what you do. And as long as you push it to the border where you think that it's okay, just do that. And it's up to anyone. There's no one that can point fingers. That's one of the obstacles in the green movement, is that as soon as you talk about it, you should not smoke, you cannot eat flesh, you cannot do that, otherwise you're not trustworthy. And that's another